Hello viewers, myself is Dr. Neeta and you are watching my channel Learn Literature with Dr. Neeta. So let us begin today's topic.
Hello dear students, today we would learn about post-colonialism and it is the third video in this part. In the first video we discussed the general perception of post-colonialism and its characteristics, and in the second part we discussed the famous critic Homi K. Bhabha, and in this part we are going to discuss the contribution of Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak in developing the post-colonial theory. So now let us discuss. She is Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. She is an American Indian literary theorist, cultural critic, feminist critic and the post-colonial scholar. She was born on February 24th, 1942 in Calcutta. And there she got a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Calcutta, and later she received her postgraduate and PhD degrees from Cornell University, United States. After that she taught at several institutions and ultimately she joined Columbia University where she became the professor of humanities. One of her most influential works is her essay Can Subaltern Speak? It was published in 1988 and it is a famous work and it has influenced the post-colonial theory a lot. In it she explores the issue related to representation of certain communities or group of people or nations, and power and the voices of the marginalized groups within the post-colonial context. Here is a list of Spivak's work. Her fame is also as a translator. She translated Jacques Derrida's Dalle Grammatology into English, and it is also a creditable contribution of Spivak. And in Other World, Essay in Cultural Politics, The Post-Colonial Critics, Thinking, Academic Freedom, Engendered Post-Coloniality, Outside in Teaching Machine, The Critique of Post-Colonial Region, Death of a Discipline, Other Asias, Readings. These are a few works of Gayatri Spivak. And she was awarded Sahitya Academy Award in 1977 for the English translation of Mahashweta Devi's short stories. The title of those short stories was Imaginary Maps, and she also received Padma Bhushan in 2013. Now, the qualities of Spivak as a post-colonial critic. One thing that you should keep in mind that she not only strengthened the theoretical insight of post-colonial criticism, rather she applied the theory of post-colonialism on the literature of the post-colonial period. She critically examined the process of Western knowledge production and its implication for understanding and representing non-Western cultures. As all of you know, Edward Said, the famous post-colonial critic, in his work Orientalism, has talked about the image of East that is given by the people of West was quite objectionable because they presented the people of East merely as backward and poor. So similarly, Spivak was agreeing with what Edward Said has said, and she further developed the idea in her work, and she has tried to understand that process, that power structures, those strategies through which the Western people tried to project the image of the people of East. Spivak has applied her theoretical insight to the analysis of post-colonial literature. As I told you, she was not only a theorist, but she also applied that theory on literature. With her deep engagement with deconstruction, post-colonial theory, feminism, and Marxism. So, these are the fields which were strengthened by Spivak. The theory of deconstruction was given by Jacques Derrida, and she further strengthened that theory and applied that theory to the different parts of the literary text. Post-colonial theory, which was propounded by Edward Said, Homi K. Bhabha, and other critics, she also took further that post-colonial theory and applied it on literature. And similar is the case with feminism and Marxism. She tried to apply it on literature. Her engagement with text often involves a careful examination of language, discourse, and politics of representation. She mainly deals with these things. She is talking about the discourse and language, and she talks about the politics of representation of the particular communities or the group of people. Spivak's engagement with deconstruction is influenced by the thinkers like Jacques Derrida. As she translated Derrida, she was also interested in his ideas. This has led her to critically examine language, discourse, and meaning, because Jacques Derrida has also used these things. So that is why she is also trying to deconstruct the things according to her own manner. She analyzes power dynamics and the social structures owing to her Marxist background. And when she is talking about the social structures and the power dynamics that is working within the society, and how this power dynamics work to present a group of people or a community, she analyzed each and everything because she was under the impact of the Marxist theory. Now, first we would understand how she applied deconstruction on the literary works. She introduced deconstructionist method into post-colonial studies. Her work often involved deconstructing binary oppositions. So, the things used to understood in binary oppositions, she deconstructed that idea and she challenged the fixed categories as previously the things used to studies. As far as the identity is concerned, that was also was understood, that was also understood under the fixed categories, under the binary oppositions, and she challenged that idea because like Edward Said, she also believes in the hybrid personalities, hybrid language, and hybrid culture. So, she challenges fixed categories and reveals the complexities and instabilities inherent in language and cultural constructs. In her influential essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, Spivak draws on deconstructive insight to examine the power dynamics inherent in the representation of the marginalized groups. So, this is the famous essay, and in this essay she is talking about the voice of subalterns. Basically, subalterns are the people who are on the margins of the social structure, and she has revealed how the power dynamics work, and only the people of center are getting representation in the mainstream, and the people on the margins always get unrepresented in the discourse of those things. Her deconstructive approach is applied to literature, cultural text, and that is why she is also studied very curiously even in the cultural studies. encouraging a scholar to question and critique the prevailing interpretation and power structures embedded in language and culture. So, like the other post-colonial critics, she is also talking about the power structures that remain embedded in the language and culture, and she is asking the scholars to question those power structure and try to deconstruct them so that even the voices of the marginalized may be heard, the discourses and the language of the people on the margin may also be understood, the culture of marginalized may also be understood. Now, what she thinks about the feminist theory. Spivak is known for her contribution to feminist theory, particularly in her exploration to the issues like gender, race and class. She talks about class because she was under the influence of Marxism, and she was also a feminist. That is why she is also exploring the issue like gender. Her work often challenged traditional feminist perspective. She was against, like a feminist, she was against the traditional feminist perspective, and she always emphasizes for a more inclusive and clear-cut understanding of women's experience. As in the texts, the experiences of the women were not so clearly defined, they were not studied very well, so she talks about understanding women's experiences so that the discourse may be more inclusive. She challenges essentialist notion of identity and proposes the fluid and constructed nature of categories like gender and ethnicity. So, essentialist notion of identity is there, that each and every identity, whether it is of the national identity or the cultural identity, it is used to believe that certain essential qualities or characteristics would be there in that particular identity. But Spivak was against that view. She challenges that view because according to her, like the other post-colonial critics also talks in the same manner, the concept of identity is a fluid one, and identity gradually gets constructed under the influence of the various factors. So we cannot favor the essentialist notion of identity. Similarly, the identity of a particular gender cannot be essentialist. She challenges that aspect because it is also under a kind of construction. Gendered identity is also under construction, and it gets shaped and reshaped by the various influences. She stresses the importance of considering the diverse experiences of women, particularly those of non-Western and marginalized background. So, as I told you previously that she was desirous of a more inclusive discourse, and she wants that the diverse experiences of the women may be included in it, and she also talks about the women who are non-Western and and belonging to the marginalized background, because during the colonial period the texts and the literature and the discourse on women was merely limited to the Western women. But she wants inclusiveness in which non-Western and marginalized women from the marginalized backgrounds may also be included. Now, this is the concept of subalterns according to Spivak. There is a center, and center is possessing the power, and all around, and the discourse of anything is guided by the center, as it is powerful, and it molds the discourse, it molds the identity according to its own needs and desires. And the people who are remaining on the margins, they may be the slaves or women or the less or laborers or the minority races or the peasants or the Orient or the third world. They always remain at the margin. They cannot come in the mainstream because the powerful center does not allow them to talk, does not allow them to raise their voices, and that is why they can never become the part of the central discourse. So this is what Spivak has explained in her concept of subalterns. The subalterns, the term subaltern originally comes from Antonio Gramsci's Marxist theory. This is a Marxist term where it refers to socially and politically marginalized group. In Antonio Gramsci's Marxist theory, it is standing for socially and politically marginalized group. Spivak redefined this term and made certain changes in it according to the post-colonial theory. She used it to represent certain groups like the Third World, Orient, women, tribal people, etc., which exist on the margins of the dominant power structure and these people are systematically excluded. So systematically, how they are going to be excluded? These people are systematically excluded. Why? Because the power is possessed by a few on the center, and they intentionally keep all them away from the main discourse. So that is why they are systematical. A number of strategies are adopted to exclude them from participating in the mainstream discourse. She emphasized the need to understand the ways in which the voices of marginalized are often silenced by the dominant discourses. So in her concept of subalterns, she also talks about those techniques, those strategies that are used by the people at the center so that they may keep the marginalized silenced. Spivak pays special attention to the gender dimension of subalternity. She is also talking about the subalternity of women. One thing is that the women are always subaltern. They are not the part of the mainstream. But even the women, when they are from some other group of marginalized, they become doubly marginalized in that case. For example, we may understand that the women are at the margin. But if the women is belonging to the Dalits or women is belonging to the laborer class, then even in this class they are marginalized, and in the whole structure they are marginalized. In this manner, women are always doubly marginalized if they are belonging to these marginalized sections of the society. Doubly marginalized, and they have to face the double oppression. First one, because they are women, they are oppressed. Secondly, they are belonging to some marginalized group. In that case, they are doubly marginalized. She raises questions about the representation of subaltern voices within the post-colonial discourse. So, this is the chief concept given by Spivak, and she wants to raise the question about the representation of subalterns within the post-colonial discourse. So now this is the concept of center and margin. This is the center where the power is possessed. These are the people on the margins whose voice is not heard. But Spivak thinks about those who are beyond the periphery of margins. For that she uses the term outsides. Spivak uses the term margins to refer the peripheries or the edges of the dominant discourse and the power structure. The margin represents the spaces that are often excluded in the mainstream narratives, as I told you. These could be voices. These marginalized may be people, so their voices remain unheard. These marginalized may be the cultures. For example, at the center during the colonial period, there was the British culture. The cultures of the different colonies were of no use or were considered inferior, or they may be the perspectives that exist at the periphery of the dominant social, political and cultural framework. This center margin relationship exists not only at the social level but at the political and cultural levels also. Now, another idea that is projected by Spivak is outsides. The idea of outside extends the idea of margin by suggesting spaces beyond established boundaries. Spivak is interested in exploring what exists beyond the recognized center of power and discourse. So, even the people who are beyond those margins were in eyes, or the culture or the voices which were beyond even the boundaries of those margins, Spivak was interested in them. Spivak is also concerned with the issues of agency and representation. She questions whether marginalized group can speak for themselves. Can subaltern speak? That is the question that is raised by Spivak. Or if they are always spoken by others, can they speak for themselves or they are spoken by others? The challenge is to allow these voices agency. So now during post-colonial time, it is a challenge to allow these voices agency, that they may be allowed to have an agency who may raise their voice, and to resist the tendency of dominant discourse to define and represent the other on their terms. So now they should get an agency or they should speak themselves. So this is the question which she is dealing with. So the power should be given to them, or to resist the tendency of dominant discourses to define and represent. So it is not the tendency of the dominant discourse to define and represent the other who are on the periphery. Rather, efforts should be made so that their voices may be raised. Now her concept of strategic essentialism. As all of you know that the post-colonial critics are often against this essentialist concept of identity or culture. But Spivak is talking about strategic essentialism, which sometimes proves to be good. The concept is introduced by Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak in her essay Subaltern Study Deconstructing Historiography in context of post-colonial discourse and identity politics. Now she is talking about identity politics. What is that? And in this identity politics, strategic essentialism is essential. In general sense, essentialism refers to the idea that there are inherent and unchanging qualities or characteristics that define a particular group, identity or category. And most of the post-colonial critics were against this essentialistic group or identity or category. But strategic essentialism is a little bit different from essentialism. Is a strategic use of essentialism as a tool for political mobilization. She says that even essentialism can strategically be used for the purpose of political mobilization, for the purpose of recognition of the group on the margins, or for the purpose of representation, and for the purpose of social justice, particularly by marginalized or subaltern groups. Now, with the example, we would understand it. It is contemporary deployment of essentialist language and identity for political purpose. For political purpose, essentialism can also be strategically applied. She is talking this. For example, indigenous community facing environmental exploitation may strategically emphasize shared cultural identity. So this is going on, that the indigenous communities living in some forest, etc., and the land is going to be taken by the government in such case, then they talk about facing environmental exploitation, and they use their shared cultural identity as a strategy, and they make the government understand that they are the traditional value, that they have their traditional values and practices. They are collectively using essentialism as a strategy, and under the cover of the traditional values and practices, they are convincing the government that it is not right to grab their land. In this manner, they are trying to prove that they would be able to protect their identity. So in this manner, essentialism has been used as a strategy, and this induces political mobilization to resist destructive policies and advocate for sustainable development. Similarly, in the case of feminist movement, she tells that the feminist or gender-based discrimination has been used as a strategy. This essentialism, it means that the women are discriminated. This essentialism or this essentialist characteristic of females has been used as a strategy to develop the feminist movement, because this helps to create solidarity among women from diverse backgrounds, giving rise to a collective voice to challenge patriarchy, discrimination, and advocate for gender equality. So the feminist movement could take this shape because the essentialism, it means the essentialist identity of women has been used strategically. Post-colonial nations may strategically emphasize a unified national identity to resist external influences. Similarly, the post-colonial nations who were under the impact of Western culture may show their unified national identity, and in this way they may resist from the external influences and may redefine their cultural and political landscapes. This essentialized identity becomes a tool for asserting sovereignty and challenging lingering effects of colonialism. Now, she also talks about diaspora. Spivak discusses diaspora in context of political post-colonial displacement, where communities are forced to move and live outside their homeland. So diaspora, as all of you know, are the persons who are forced to move or they are willing to move and live outside their homelands due to colonization or globalization. She examines the impact of displacement on identity and subjectivity of these people. Spivak explains the individuals of diasporic communities handle complex cultural landscapes. So she says that people who have migrated from their homeland to some other land, they have to handle complex cultural landscapes. It means they belong to two cultures. One is the culture of their homeland, and they have to maintain connections to both culture of their homeland and the culture of their adopted countries. In this manner, their identities are often characterized by blending of the multiple cultural influences. Now, they would not be having the fixed identities. If they were Indians and going to America, so when they are settling there or when they are trying to settle there, they are on one hand having the cultural impact of Indian culture, and the culture of America is also affecting them. So in that case, their identities are often characterized by the blending of multiple cultural influences, challenging the fixed notion of identity. So here, like other post-colonial critics, she is challenging the fixed notion of identity. She also highlights the power dynamics involved in the representation of subaltern and diasporic experiences and explained how these groups have been historically silenced within the colonial and post-colonial context. So as she talks about subaltern, she also talks about diaspora, and she says that their voices have also been silenced because they were not the part of the margins, because they were not the part of the centers, they were also marginalized, and that is why the discourse of diaspora also remained on the margin. It cannot come to the mainstream discourse. So thanks for your patience listening. I think you would be able to understand views of Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak.